Hey everyone, it's time for another episode of A Critic's Journey, and today we're taking a look at Jeepers Creepers 2. As a lot of you will know, the last episode we took a look at Jeepers Creepers because Monster Pictures are bringing out Jeepers Creepers Reborn this week. So I've been on a little bit of a Jeepers Creepers marathon recently, going back and watching the original films so that I'm all up to date for the new film. Now, in the last episode, we took a look at the original Jeepers Creepers, and today we're going to take a look at Jeepers Creepers 2. And one of the things that you'll notice I talk about as I'm going through this franchise is that each film feels like it's had its own identity. The first film was very much an indie kind of film. But this one kind of takes on a different a feel. This film takes on more of the vibe that you kind of came to expect from films like Final Destination, The Faculty, in that it centers around a kind of high school horror in the sense. Most of this film's is set on a bus, driven by Betty Borman, played by Diane Delano, under the watchful eye of a coach called Charlie Hanna, played by Tom Gossam, and it's basically a basketball team. So there's almost a little bit of an element of One Tree Hill in there, that you've got these jocks that are on a high after winning a championship game. And suddenly they find themselves facing the Creeper. But at the same time, you've also got a separate story happening where a father and father-son are going after the Creeper because he's just killed their younger son, which of course brings Jack Taggart Sr., played by Ray Wise, into the film as well. But like I said, one of the things I love about this series is that even though it's been written and directed by the same writer-director as the first film, there's a completely different feel to this film. It still has that kind of indie feel, I guess, in a sense. Again, this film had studio backing, but the way that it's shot and the fact that a lot of it is actually still set like on this bus gives it that kind of indie feel where you almost feel that you've got a director who can't go too far outside of that location because he doesn't have the money to do so. So it's kind of a weird feeling film. Now, I can talk a little bit more about the lore of Jeepers Creepers here, because by now I'm guessing that you've watched number one. So, of course, one of the big important things about the folklore of the Creeper is that every 23 years he feeds for 23 days. Now, Victor Salva thought that he could pull off the ultimate chess move here by making this film the end of the Creeper's cycle for this 23 years. This film is set on the 23rd day of the Creeper's feeding frenzy. So Salva kind of thought that he was doing something pretty smart by doing that. He thought that it would stop films in the future. Of course, we learnt that didn't happen. But I take my hat off to a director, a screenwriter who thinks, you know what, I only want to be the only person working on these films, so I'll do this to stop it. I think one of the things I love about this film is, again, Salva does something different. I get the feeling that most directors and most screenwriters, if they'd written Jeepers Creepers 2, would have either have had the Taggart story of revenge or the bus. The fact that Salva finds a way to incorporate both, I think, it shows that he was a creative a filmmaker, still is. He's still alive, so I shouldn't say was, is a creative filmmaker. But he was very creative with what he did with this film by incorporating both stories and letting them incorporate so well. I remember seeing this film in the cinema, and I loved it. I liked it better than the original, and I still do. I think going back and watching it this time's kind of showed me again why this is one of those franchises where the sequel is better than the original. But the fact that he's able to combine those two, when I watched it in the cinema for the first time, I had no inkling that the bus was even going to happen. When the story started off on the Taggart farm, I thought that was going to be the story of the second film, was going to be the Jack Taggart and his son getting revenge for the death of his other son. So the fact that Salva was able to tie that in is really well done. The other thing that I really noticed going back and watching this again is that none of the teenagers really in this are that memorable. Very little, like none of them are played by actors that went on to anything major. Normally, if you think of the films around this time, the actors that came out of them all went on to bigger and better things. Like you think of The Faculty, and you've got like Jordana Brewster, Elijah Wood. You go over and have a look at the films that I mentioned in the last episode as well. Films like Roadkill, and you had Lily Sabowski and Paul Walker fronting that. Even going and looking at films like Disturbing Behaviour, which this one feels the most like. Disturbing Behaviour was basically a who's who of that time period. You had Kerr Smith in there. You had Sean William Scott. It was basically a who's who, and those that weren't known at that time went on to bigger and better things. That didn't happen with this film with most of the teenagers, and to be honest, it's kind of bad when you're watching it, but you don't even remember names of the kids on the bus in this film. You kind of remember their personalities and what happens to them, kind of thing, rather than anything else. This film does have a brilliant scene, though, where they explore the folklore of the creeper picking people out. And I think there's a very creative and very creepy scene in this film where the creeper is looking through the bus window and he's picking out the teenagers. And that then leads to an interesting development on board the bus where they decide who's been chosen and who hasn't. I won't go too much into that at the moment because I know a lot of you out there are probably going to sit down and watch Jeepers Creepers 2 now that I've talked about that. But Salva is a very, very interesting horror director for me, in that the first two films in the Jeepers Creepers franchise are so creative, and they show what a good director, screenwriter he is. But he never really went on to great things, which you would have expected off the back of these films. But anyway, look, Jeepers Creepers 2, I love the atmosphere of this film. I love the suspense that comes about with people trapped on a bus. To me, that is still one of the best horror tropes that you can create as a filmmaker, is that claustrophobic kind of feel where people are trapped and they can't get away from the horror. Like the audience, the kids on the bus have so many questions about the creeper in this film that goes unanswered. Is it safe to run? Is it not safe? And I love that element of this film. I still think to date, and I'll say this because I haven't seen Reborn yet, so I don't know how I'm going to feel about it, but to date for me, Jeepers Creepers 2 is still the best Jeepers Creepers movie, and I'm giving it 4 out of 5.